We're already in some cases, like I had some guests on from California. Now, California to North Carolina might as well be a different planet in terms of the way we think about. And I'm not bashing California, and I'm okay with California, but we're thinking is so far apart. Like the engineers here, the community here, generally speaking, is like decarb. Let me do the math. And they do the math. It doesn't make sense. We're just pushing the carbon over here. We don't have, so it's like, it's not an emotional thing. It's not a religion for us. We have some owners who say, we're decarbon, and I need to replace this, gas boiler with a heat pump boiler. And we say, okay, you can replace the gas boiler for 6 figures, but it's going to cost you $400,000 to replace the other, and it's like, oh, well, I think we'll wait on the decarb.
Lovely to meet you, Tony.
Great to meet you today.
Currently in the UK, it's 2:45 p.m. In the States, it's
9:45
a.m. So I really appreciate you coming out this morning to have this conversation with us. Just want to go for a bit about you before we go into the conversation. This is still UK versus US differences, commercial, residential, but one of the reasons why Ben got in touch was he sent us the link to your channel, and you being knowledgeable in HVAC is an understatement. It seems like you cover all elements and you actually educate, which there's a lack of education in HVAC in the UK, and I'm sure that was probably your gap in the market for the States, for the US. So your YouTube channel is called HVAC TV. Do you mind just running through what HVAC TV is and how you got into HVAC and your background? Just summarize it briefly, please.
Yeah, I'd be glad to. So introduced to HVAC by my father, my dad, Joe Mormino, who is a residential installer, or was back in the day. He's retired now. And would work with him in the summers, go out to job sites, install split systems, sometimes in the attic in Florida in the summer, which was really hot. So I liked the idea of being an HVAC, but I ended up going to college, got an engineering degree, came out of college and started working for one of the big manufacturers, and did that for 20 years. So I've been in the business since 97. So I don't know. Is that
who? Can you say who the manufacturer was?
It was Train.
Oh, okay. Wow. Okay. Train.
Yeah. So worked for them. Yeah. Worked for them right out of college. And really one of the good things at the time in working for them was they really instilled what you were talking about earlier, which is like education, HVAC education, and the basics of psychrometrics were pounded into us. And I'm grateful for that because it laid the foundation to, my career. And really, it's funny, you were talking about this because we're doing a show tomorrow on how to read a psychrometric chart. We do that a couple times a year because it's like, I love the basics. It's so super important. So anyway, so I worked in sales for the majority of my career. About 5 years ago, or whenever COVID hit, we as a company, the company I work for is called Insight Partners. We're an HVAC rep firm. So we sell commercial HVAC equipment.
Yeah.
We were scrambling, trying to figure out how are we going to get in front of our customers, right? Because offices had shut down. So we started using things like Teams and Zoom and GoToMeeting and all this stuff, which was great. And when people started using it, like, oh, this is awesome. People got really excited about it. But then it kind of died down. People got sick of Teams meeting. Like, oh my gosh, I got to go to another Teams meeting. So we started looking at other ways to get in front of people. YouTube was a natural fit for us because we kind of had some experience with doing the meetings online. And then we looked at LinkedIn Live. We do a lot of stuff on LinkedIn. So it really was born out of that. And the purpose of the HVAC TV channel the tagline is to educate and empower the HVAC community. And we have found, and I'm sure you understand this, and most professionals do, that the best way to grow your brand, the best way to grow your business is to provide value. Like, we want to give back to the community, not because we love the community and we're appreciative of everything we have. That's one part of it. But the other part of it is it's a great way to grow your business. So it's a win-win, right? You get to give back. It's a win-win-win for me because I get to be the host and I really enjoy this part of the business. So I moved into marketing full-time about 5 years ago from the sales aspect of the business.
Okay. So HVAC TV is a big part of your life. So is it something that you're doing weekly, daily?
So I personally, I'm the marketing director for Insight Partners. I have a team. Shout out to Heather Robinson and Courtney Sanders, who are on my team. And we handle all the marketing aspects of Insight Partners, which is a HVAC rep firm, and also Hobbs and Associates, one of our sister companies. So we do the traditional marketing stuff, the websites, the brochures, the PowerPoints, things like that. HVAC TV, and then the podcast version of that, which is the Engineers HVAC Podcast,
Okay.
takes up my personal time, probably half of the day to 3/4 of the day. And now that includes content that we push out daily. We try to post 2 to 3 times on each platform. So it's 5 or 6 platforms a day, which, as you know, is not an easy thing to do. But we have found when you want to get in front of people and build the momentum, you really need to put the stuff out there.
So you're in HVAC for work. You're in HVAC because you inherited it, and you're in HVAC because there's a bit of a hobby there. So you've got a personal interest in HVAC. So whatever you say, there'll be passion, and there's going to be some tech behind that with experience. So you can cover the subjects we'll go through. Your answers will be, although based in the States, you've got a fair bit of knowledge to back your case. What sort of products do you sell?
So we sell commercial HVAC, some of the major lines you might be familiar with. We have
Your
GreenHeck.
camera's muted for some reason.
Oh, testing. How is it now? Can you hear me? I can hear you. Testing.
Yeah, I can hear you now, Tony.
I got you now.
Why is that kicked?
Sorry about that. I don't know what's going on today.
Yeah.
It's not seeing the
Testing.
I think our mixer's just dropped out for some reason. Has it dropped out?
Yeah, I can't. I hear you, but it's through a different mic for sure.
What? It's all plugged in. Unless it's
Very odd.
so odd. Never had that before.
Well, it's dropped out the.
Yeah, it's like
You can refresh your browser. That'll help sometimes.
Yeah, which one?
yeah.
Which one?
Try the main stereo. No sound. Click that again. Click track 2.
Yeah. Tony, you there?
I'm here. I can hear you.
Perfect. Got it. Yeah, it
It's
kicked.
the mic there as well.
It's not your mic though. It's a different. I hear a fan or a plane or something. That's better. What's that?
Is that better?
It is a little better, but it's low. Can you give me a test?
Test.
It just sounds low.
You didn't just touch anything over there, did you? That's weird. Very odd.
It's okay. I can turn you up a little bit on my end. Try it again.
Test.
That's good.
Cool. Right. Yeah, for some reason it kicked out. I don't know if it was the antivirus software.
It might be.
It kicked out our mixer, which has just destroyed everything. Right. Okay. So Tony, what sort of equipment do you sell? Being a rep.
So we sell commercial HVAC equipment. So some of the major lines we have are Aon, GreenHeck, Hobbs and Associates sells York equipment. Okay. We sell Nortec Air Solutions. So we've got some, Armstrong pumps. So we've got some pretty big lines. So
okay. So I don't know any of them products that you've just mentioned. Are they American? Are they chillers? Are they multi-split units?
So we have for multi-splits, we have LG. You're probably familiar with that. VRF.
Yeah, we've got LG Spanish. It's a Spanish product as well. It's a Spanish product, yeah.
Air handling units. Nortec Air Solutions is custom air handling units. Some people know them as Temptrol, Ventrol, Hunt Air, Fanwall, and then we've got Aon is packaged DX equipment up to 200 tons. York is chillers.
We know York. We know York. Yeah, we know York is obviously an American brand. Going on AHU. So, something that's changed a lot in the UK the last sort of 10 years is when we replace an AHU in the commercial sort of sector. It used to be a belt-driven motor with an impeller. and it would be direct supply air or direct extract air. But now every AHU that goes in has to have a thermal wheel or what's the other type? Plate heat exchanger. And they're all EC fans. Every AHU that goes in has to have an EC fan, because you might know more about it than me, but they're up to 40% more efficient than a standard belt driven fan. Is that something which is happening in the States, or are you still using, or in North Carolina state or your area? Is that the norm, or are things similar to the UK?
So the norm for the type of equipment we sell has been direct drive fans for quite some time.
Okay.
So belts, we do have products that have belts, but mostly it's direct drive fans. Now the motors can differ from a high efficiency standard type motor to an EC motor. We see EC motors in the smaller equipment.
Mm-hmm.
We don't see them a lot in the bigger type equipment, although they are starting to gain in popularity.
So you wouldn't have one of our larger AHUs. I won't mention sizes because I'd probably be wrong, but we would have like 4 Zeal EC. I don't know if you have Zeal EC fans out in the States, but that's a very big EC manufacturer in the UK. Well, they're not a UK brand. I think they're Danish or something. They would have 4 of these direct drive EC fans rather than having one great big impeller with a belt drive or an older style, just like an IE2 or an IE3 motor. Is that something that you're having in the States, or are you still having the traditional type of motors with a direct impeller?
For sure. We call that a fan wall or a fan array here in the US.
Okay.
So it's common that if you have, let's say you have a unit with 20,000 CFM, you may have at least 2, sometimes 4 fans. If you had something larger than that, you almost always have 4 fans. Not always, but it really just depends on the application. I should speak, and I know engineers don't like absolutes, but generally speaking, if you have the right budget and the right owner, and it's a 50,000 CFM unit, you probably have 4 fans in there with backdraft dampers and things like that. So,
okay. And recirc? Is the States big on recirc?
Yeah, I mean, we do have outdoor air requirements it depends on the application and what's going on in the space. So a typical school might be 25% OA.
Okay.
Hospital might be around that same. I don't really know 100%.
Okay.
Most facilities, 20% OA. And then if you have a large exhaust, of course, you have more outside air. And you mentioned, we call them heat wheels or enthalpy wheels here, energy recovery wheels, all kind of named for the same thing. Yeah. We do see those quite often. It depends on the state as to whether they're mandated or not and the percent of OA, and they make a lot of sense in the South, but up North, you might have a plate and frame heat exchanger instead, because the US is so diverse, and if you're in Minnesota, an energy recovery wheel, a total enthalpy wheel is probably not very useful, but a plate and frame heat exchanger is incredibly useful due to the heating hours and such. So it just depends on the area.
I see. And chillers. So it's a hot topic in the UK with refrigerant. What we're seeing now is very low GWP refrigerants, R1234ZE, 513A, 454B or 454C. Even propane, R290 in some of the smaller chillers. But what we're noticing is the lower the GWP number, the less efficient the chillers become. So I never liked it, Tony, but I'm actually a fan of R32 now. It was very much, when it was brought into the UK, it was mildly flammable, which it isn't flammable, but it's mildly flammable, and it had a lot of negative press because it's very similar to R410A. But that has a GWP of 675. But they're actually, the chillers are really, really efficient with R32 refrigerant, and it's the same with heat pumps. But some of these newer chillers, so what we're doing now is we're putting lower GWP refrigerants in new chillers, which are less efficient than not what's in there at the moment. But I think we're going to get there. I can see it happening. And you tell the consultants, but the chillers we're putting in, the GWP is slightly higher, but it's going to save you 20% over the lower GWP refrigerant. And they just say, no, it's more harmful. And then you sort of look at I don't know how far you've gone into it, Tony, but I've heard that the likes of R1234ZE, which is a GWP, I think, of like 1, is actually quite a nasty refrigerant once it breaks up in the air. I don't know the sciences behind it, but some of these low GWP refrigerants, they have low GWP, numbers, but apparently they're pretty horrible for the air, for the atmosphere. It's not something I can be definitive of, but is that something which is a topic with HVAC where people are asking you for the lower GWP numbers, and it's that stupidity thing where GWP of 1, perfect, but it cost me 10 times the amount to run. Who cares? I'm saving the world. Is that a topic out there that's gaining momentum?
Well, see, you're making the mistake of using logic in your analysis. You got to just surrender. It doesn't make any sense to an engineer, right? All this stuff. And, I'm going to take my Insight Partners hat off and speak from my Tony hat for a minute. But, I've been in the industry since 97. And since day one, it's like we moved to, I can't remember what the first transition was, but I think it was from R11 to 123, I think, if my memory serves. But anyway, we moved to a less efficient refrigerant because back in the day, it was ozone depletion was the thing, right? It wasn't, no one was paying attention to global warming, it was ozone. So we got to get rid of the chlorine in the refrigerant. Problem is chlorine's a very efficient component in refrigerant. So we went to a less efficient refrigerant. And if you look at a centrifugal chiller, which can literally operate for 30 years if it's maintained without a problem, like if you maintain it well, that extra carbon you're putting into the atmosphere, because 90% of our energy comes from coal, right? So you're transferring that over to the coal. I don't know if it's 90%, but it's a big percentage here in the States.
Big number, yeah.
You're transfer over the coal. It makes no sense logically, but to the public or to the environmental concerns, it's lower. We're saving that. So it's like you can't. If you got to go 2 steps in the math, you can't get there with most people. I have learned. So. We are agnostic as a company. We rep products that have 32. We rep products 454B. I've done so many A2L presentations. I'm like, as soon as I go, and I just did one last week, and I walk in there, the first thing I say is, "Are you sick of these presentations yet?" And the engineers are like, "Yes, but we still have a ton of questions." And I'm like, "I'll tell you what I know," and I show them what I know, and here's probably the questions you have that we don't have the answers to. So, I just look at this stuff like we as engineers, HVAC manufacturers, reps, and manufacturers, we just react to these policies. Like we don't get a seat at the table, at least not a big seat, as to the science behind it. There's not any engineers making these decisions maybe there are. I don't know. I shouldn't speak out of turn. I'm speaking from, I have friends who work for large manufacturers, and most large manufacturers have a governmental affairs division. They spend a lot of time in Washington. They talk to Congress. They talk to the EPA. And my friend says this, he goes, Tony, he was on our podcast. He goes, Tony, when I go to the EPA to discuss the policies, I walk into the room. I'm a PE. This is him talking. I've got 40 years of experience. Sitting next to me, there's an intern engineer from the EPA, and there's 11 attorneys. Like that's where the discussion. So I'm like, okay, I get it. Like, so we don't we're just reacting to the policies. We're, our personal beliefs on the matter, and we do tons of social media stuff, and we hear everything like, why are you promoting these flammable? This is the wrong way to go. We're like, look, we're just educating the community on the reality of it. We are agnostic to it as a company. We rep products with both of the A2L refrigerants, so we're okay with both of them. We've vetted them. We're trained on them. We're certified. But it's just like the whole thing is nutso. And I don't know if we're going to touch on decarbonization, but that's another thing that's the same kind of rationale. You're taking out the gas.
Let's go straight into it. So decarbonization. So I think the UK is probably a few steps ahead of the States. Maybe, and what I mean by that is obviously we've always seen the States as everyone driving V8 trucks, and this is a generic. This is what every British person thinks everyone is in the States. Like, in the States, you either drive a Tesla or a V8, and everyone has gas furnaces, and you've still got R22, and you still use gauges, and you use enthalpy charts. Whereas in the UK, we have PCB boards and multi-split inverters and things like that. Because I've heard that I think the multi-split has only just arrived in the States. That's how stereotypical it is here.
Yeah.
And I know it's not true, but what we see with decarbonisation is the facts are, if you do speak to the right people, the UK hasn't got enough power. Like, we do not have enough power to decarbonise. And also the cost of replacing a gas boiler or a furnace in a commercial building with a full pipe heat recovery, not heat recovery, a full pipe chiller. The full pipe chiller is like 3 times the price. and electricity costs 3 times the price. So it's kind of like lose-lose. What we've personally done recently, we're involved with a project where we've replaced a chiller due to it being, obsolete, 17 years old. And we've replaced it with a Daikin product, which produces 65 degrees as a heat pump. And we're adjusting the Trend BMS system. So in the winter, it's actually heating up the cooling coil on the air handling unit. And it's then reducing the gas load on the boilers. So the site is only paying for reprogramming and some labor on site. And that's where decarbonization, in my opinion, is perfect, because you're replacing an asset which needs to be replaced with something which can do more. But we see a lot of sites where they go, we're fully decarbonizing, we're going to spend hundreds of thousands of pounds, and it's going to cost me 3 times more to run, but I'm saving the planet. And then you look at it and you say, well, nothing needed to be replaced. So, there's something called ESG, which is like a scoring system, and I think ESG is in America as well. But there's Scope 3, which says, well, how much carbon does the factory produce or the vehicles produce to get the product into the building? And when you look at replacing things for the sake of it to tick that decarbonization box, you go, well, you're using a ton of carbon to just get the product in the building. You didn't need to do that in the first place. So it's still and it's still quite new. A lot of project managers and consultants, it's in the UK, it's still quite new. One thing that we sat down with somebody who's a consultant called Phil Draper. He's a consultant in the southeast of the UK, and he specializes in decarbonization. And what he's quite smart with and savvy, and I think this might be the case in the States, it's something that I learned, was when we specify in a commercial building in the UK hot water requirements, we're still using out of date statistics. So we have to allow a cylinder which can allow somebody to wash their hands for 3 minutes and have a shower for 10 minutes. Like, who washes their hands for 3 minutes? So what he specializes in is decarbonization, but with a brain, meaning why are we heating water with a chiller to 85 degrees using a cascade setup where you have a COP of under 2? Whereas if you're heating the water to 65 degrees, you're actually getting a COP of 3. So he's gone into the maths, and he meters everything, and everything is metered and adjusted with a central system. But we are seeing, unfortunately, boilers being removed from buildings, and they put these 4-pipe chillers in with cascade water-to-water heat pumps, which heat the water to 85 degrees. And the manufacturers are saying, you do realize the COP is under 2 and the electricity is 3 times the cost. And it's like, you're using more electricity, which is in essence, burning more carbon. Even they're using renewable to you're just sending the carbon responsibility to the electrical providers. So how is it in the States? Is it clear? Is it clear as day, or is it quite muddy waters with net zero and decarbonization?
So a lot of similarities to what you just explained. The problem is, the whole philosophy of it's great. If we could all electrify and we have renewables to power it, it's great. But if you're just transferring it to the power grid and that power is made from coal, then you really haven't done anything in terms of decarbonization. So it's like we have the same concerns with the electric grid. So it just depends, and it's like depends on where you are in the country. But we as a manufacturer, we present the solutions. Like, we have heat pump chillers, which are real popular right now. That we sell. We're selling a lot of those. We have heat pump water heaters are gaining in popularity, which are nice because you can heat the water and you could cool water at the same time, or cool a space at the same time. So I'm a big fan of moving the heat around, right? If you can take the heat, what I've seen in Europe, it hasn't really hit the States yet that I could see is, and I know you're not Europe, but I've seen over there is data centers have a ton of heat they're taking out. If you could use that heat for your domestic hot water heat, if you get that data center near a big city, then that's a great way to heat the water, and it's free, basically free.
Yeah, so we've asked them questions because we look after a data center, and the issue that you have is data centers have not many people that work in them. Like they are it's just an office block with just servers. And the heat, you're right though, the heat rejection is crazy from the heat pump from the chillers. We have a lot of free cooling chillers in the UK for data centers because and they're sort of free cooling at about 17 degrees because they're not going down as 7 degrees sort of 7 and 12 flow. They're
right
sort of 17 and 24. But you're right. It's well, as somebody from Mitsubishi Electric quite makely, as clear as Dave says it to us, is all a heat pump is it just transfers energy. It's just a transferring
moves it around.
Yeah, it just moves it around. That's from one side to the other. Touching on the water heaters because they're not gaining traction in the UK, but Daikin have got a very interesting unit which sounds very similar to what you have, and it's a heat pump water cylinder which has a cold air duct to outside. Which is good if you have a server room because or a space you just want to put like an inline diverter valve. But I don't know how that would work as a permanent solution. Is that what you have in the States already?
We see a lot of residential heat pump water heaters. I'm not really on the residential side, but if there's an area that's gaining popularity, it's probably there.
Okay.
I mean, ours is our hot water heater in our home we got a little bit of everything. We got a hot water heater that's electric. We've got a ductless split, multi indoor unit split in the basement that has an inverter. It's got 3 air handlers to 1 condenser. And then we've got an old R22 split system heat pump.
Nice.
And I have a new 410A heat pump sitting on my porch. If I can find a buddy to come over and help me install it, we're gonna put that thing in there. But yeah, so that's a typical home here. Probably has an electric hot water heater and a heat pump split system. It's pretty common in the southeast.
So your view, Tony, and as I said, it sounds like where you obviously currently live and the town you're in. So you're conservative in your approach to net zero, and you're being sensible, doing the figures, and actually making it. If it makes sense, we'll go for it. And that's kind of my view. Is I'm in line with that. I'm now a big fan of though, which I don't think it's going to take off, or it will. It'll probably be too late, but if you're replacing a chiller and it's serving air handling units, I think a few tweaks to the design and your air handling unit, you can use your chiller to do the heating and the cooling, which would, again, touching on the design that we mentioned earlier. And it's something which is really simple. Like, it's not a complicated thing to do, especially if you have a buffer vessel, which can be a thermal store. You basically got the product to do both, and you're coming off gas. Personally, it's the only way I can see fit without spending for the sake of it. If your gas boiler was to fail in your office, at work, or in your home, are people in North Carolina, where you are they automatically saying, put in a heat pump? Or is it, because that's very much what it's like here now, or is it, I'm going to do the math. No, I'm just going to replace it with a gas boiler?
I don't know for sure. In the commercial world, it's usually the least expensive option in this area. More often than not. Some might pay for a heat pump upgrade if you have a boiler, but it would have to be driven by some kind of corporate policy, is what we've seen.
Okay.
For residential, I would say most people are going to go like for like if it's too expensive to go to heat pump. It's just not that big of a focus here. Okay. California, other parts of the country, New York, it would be a whole different conversation. It's really fascinating to me how different we are. When I have people from other... Go ahead.
One thing I know, Tony, is California and New York are basically the same place, right? Just different parts of the country.
Pretty similar. And I have to be careful as a podcast host to, when people come on, I got to think in terms of, I don't want to say something offensive, It's something I might say is offensive to them, or they might say something they think. I don't get offended by what they say, but it's just, I don't know. All this stuff to me is really, there's no, what's coming to my mind, Jacob, as we talk, there's no magic bullet solution. Like, everything has engineering trade-offs, right? There's no one thing that's going to fix everything. I would love if we all can go to renewables, but the problem we have here in the States, I think, is we use too much power. Like, we have big homes, these big cars. It's funny you mentioned the story about the SUVs, because I remember this was, a long time ago, maybe 15, 20 years ago. My friend from England had his buddies come over. He was getting married, so they came over. They'd never been to the States, and I picked him up at the airport. And I had an Expedition at the time, which is a monster, big truck. And they got in there. They were like, the whole time they're like, "Oh my god, look at the size of this thing!" They couldn't believe it. And that's not saying I'm not like that's not a good thing all the time, but anyway, so we use a lot of energy, and that's part of the problem too. So,
gotcha. So just to touch on the buying process. So, when people make a purchase commercially out in the States, or at least where you are in the States, are people looking at, say, a packaged AHU, for example? Cost is always one thing, but what is the driver? Is the driver efficiency, or is it purely the cost? Meaning, and this is not, obviously everyone is different, but is someone going to say, well, I want the most efficient, okay, I'm going to go for this product because it's more efficient and it only costs a little bit more, or I'm going to go for this product because it's on a lower GWP refrigerant? What is the trend?
So it depends on the facility. If you've got an owner who's conscious of the different types of equipment and is, like a school, they're going to own the building, they're going to live there for a long time. They probably have a maintenance staff who's familiar with the difference between a heat pump and a gas pack. We call it a gas pack, a gas heating unit. They would pay maybe a little more to get the product they want. A developer who's got an office building and the unit's 20 years old and needs to be replaced, he's not going to care. He's probably going to replace it with the cheapest thing he could find because he's not paying the utility bill. So it kind of just depends. It's really all over the place. But we do have a lot of people who are, big owners, hospitals. They do care about efficiency, and they will look at and evaluate the different options for sure.
Okay, interesting. Yeah. So the UK, again, it varies depending on the type of commercial client. If it's more of a government or organization, which is like a Google or someone that has that social responsibility, they will always go for the lower GWP refrigerant, even though it costs them more. I suppose it depends who pays the bills, but if you're looking at a company which is paying for it themselves, they would probably go for an efficient product with a really good warranty. So like some of the brands give a 10-year part warranty, which is Mitsubishi Electric, which Mitsubishi Electric in the States, I think are Train and Mitsubishi Electric are like buddies in the States. So they'll give a 10-year warranty. Chillers. So going on chillers, because it's something which is quite outspoken about at the moment. And it's not just on GWP refrigerant. So I would say the States are ahead of us with chillers because most of the leader manufacturers are American. Train, York. What else have we got that we deal with in America? They're the main two anyway. They're quite big they're big in the UK. They're probably bigger in the States. So, compressors, we have screw compressors, we have inverter screw compressors, we have scroll compressors, we have turbo core compressors, and then the bigger chillers, the centrifuge, we don't get too involved with, but they're the main compressors. I know Danfoss, I think, are an American brand. They're the ones that create the turbo core. What is the trend in America? Because what we're finding now is smaller chillers seem to be going inverter scroll, which are amazing. And we've seen a bit less interest with turbo core. Is turbo core big in the States?
It is pretty popular right now. We personally sell two products that has the turbo core compressor, Dunham Bush and Smart. Smart D.
I know both of them brands actually. Yes, Smart. I didn't realize they were an American chiller.
So Dunham Bush is made they have factories all over the world. They have a factory in Homestead, Florida, which I was just at that a few months ago. And Smart is made in Canada, but I can't think of the province they're in right now. But
just to confirm, Tony, Smart, I think they specialize in data centers, and they make some really cool looking chillers, like really colorful. And whoever owns Smart was definitely an engineer because he's painted them like bright green and things, right?
That's right. Yeah. So big on data centers. So both of those companies do a lot of data center work.
Okay.
And then the York, in terms of their products we rep, the York centrifugal is very popular too. And that's a trade-off, when you're looking at a non-turbo core compressor versus a turbo core or a magnetic bearing chiller. Usually there's some kind of ROI analysis in terms of this costs more. Is it 3 years? Is it 5 years? Do they care? And it's made off of that. analysis. So, and variable speed chillers and centrifugals are popular too. York makes one of those. So it's kind of, again, it's all over the place. It really depends. Yeah.
So there isn't a common. So we're seeing an inverter scroll shift, and we're also seeing like inverters. Non-inverter screws. It's like again, it's that cheapest chiller. The cheapest, quietest chiller seems to be winning the race. But what we're seeing now, which is really, really impressive, which I really like, is we're having a lot of modular chillers now in the UK. So Mitsubishi Electric do an E-Series. If you look at the E-Series chiller, the ex-president actually said to me, that is the most efficient product they've ever made. You could drive a bus into it. And it uses VRF technology. And they come in 180 kilowatt modules. So I'm not sure what 180 kilowatt is in tons, but it's pretty big. And you can bolt them up to a megawatt. And they're quite small, so they're very good for space saving. And they bolt together with one common set of pipes. So it's it's very quick. Have you got modular chillers in the States?
Yeah, so LG makes a very similar product. They would say they have the most efficient chiller in the world. One of the things as a rep, I say, it's funny because we have.
I love it.
Under all of our brands, we have hundreds of.
You're a salesman, Tony. Yeah, I love it.
We have hundreds of brands under our line umbrella. So when someone comes from the factory and they have a presentation, we have the most. If you start out with saying we have the most efficient, fill in the blank, you lose your audience automatically, right? Because everybody thinks they have the most efficient, and somebody has the most efficient at a very specific set of conditions, right? Like it makes sense here. And the way I tell our regional folks is, look, if you're going to talk about efficiency and where you shine, say, look, here's where we shine. Here's where we're not the best, but we do have these attributes which are good for these applications. So, just to be the consultant, we like to be the consultant to the consultant and not, have these big grandiose. We got the most efficient, blah, blah, blah. Nobody has the most efficient thing for every application. And just because you're the most efficient doesn't make you the right fit all the time either, because, sometimes that's not a concern in terms of power usage and stuff. Like if you're the most efficient, but you're 5 times the cost and it's a 25-year ROI, no one's going to care about that. So.
Well, also, I know, and it touches on being a supplier, but, the most efficient chiller, which a consultant might specify, they might have terrible after service. And you might put this product in and it goes wrong and you have no access to the control panel. And then you've got a site with no chiller or expensive costs to get the manufacturer out. That's another element which always gets missed in the UK. People recommend a chiller. They won't allow you to swap it out for another one. And they wonder why the chiller is broken more time than it's working. And it's very hard to get a service tech to come out because you need to be approved or you need to be the service tech from the manufacturer. On that, how is the trend in the States? Because I'm quite paranoid as a business owner. I always have been. And we've noticed a lot of the manufacturers, they've had to grow with their own service techs because they're selling more products. But some of these, I'll mention the likes of like JCI, Johnson Controls, who own York, and Carrier. Some of these companies, you have to use their engineers for commissioning. And now you're almost always having to use them to even do the service on the chiller because they won't give you access. Is that something which has always happened in the States, or is it something which doesn't happen in the States? Because a very close friend of mine used to work for Trane in the UK for like 12 years. And he knows the ins and outs of a Trane chiller, but he knows that the end user will never have the access that he will. So they'll never be able to do everything. And that seems very American in a way because it's an American chiller. So is that something which is happening in the States, or it's always been the norm?
I'd say there was more of that happening 20 years ago than happening today. Things have kind of opened up. Most of the products, there are still a few. The big manufacturers with the centrifugals, they kind of covet that service work and they want to be the guy you call for that chiller. So JCI and Trane fall into that category. But most of the products we have, we're trained. We have a team that's trained and we will help train the contractor. We actually have something called a service academy we started. Which we host, we'll train 500 people a year or more on whatever product we have that they want training on. So we're totally open. We want to be partners with them. We don't lock anybody in or have any products that really lock them in. But the challenge for the contractors is the stuff is so technical today You
Mhm.
really got to stay on top of it. And just,
Mm.
if you just look at the VRF manufacturers, you've got 4 or 5 big players, and you've got to really know each of those systems well to do them right in terms of a troubleshooting standpoint. The installation, there's nuances, but they're all pretty similar in, the caveats of installation. But
Who
yeah,
are the
so
big
that's
players, Tony? Who are the big VRF players where in the States or what you sell? I know you're gonna say LG.
LG by far the best. No, I'm just kidding.
I love it.
The big players are Daikin, Mitsubishi, LG, and I would think Samsung's in there as well.
Okay.
That's my opinion. I don't know. I don't
Mm.
have the numbers, but I think those are the big players. But
You've got Chinese products in the States rebadged. I'm fully aware of that. On my Dia and Heya and Hisense, are they active in the States?
I've heard of Hisense. I haven't heard of the other ones, but they may be under another brand name here.
So Midea in the UK are slowly getting traction. The products are getting better. They have a lot of Bosch units rebadged.
Okay.
Do you have any Carrier VRF in the States?
We do. I'm not sure how popular it is. We typically don't see that as what I would consider a major competitor.
Yeah.
I'm not just saying that because we don't rep them. We don't typically see them.
So who do you because LG in the UK, speaking from personal experience, is it's not very good in the UK, and it's not very good meaning it's not great equipment, but they haven't got a big market share in the UK. So the equipment, and if you understand, which I know you will understand market share, Daikin and Mitsubishi Electric, they fight it out about 40% each. And then all the others fight for 20%. So Panasonic have got a lot better in the UK, Samsung a lot better, LG, Hitachi, they have some really good products, but they're not an R32 yet. If you replace an LG system today that was 10 years old, the fan coil is exactly the same size. Like they haven't changed anything dramatically. It's the same fan units. It's just small tweaks. Is that the same in the States, or is it actually the LG actually spend a lot of money on changing the products because you have a lot of market share?
I don't think it's the same here. LG is one of the if you're a rep firm, LG is one of the ones you want. Like if you had a wish list, they would be on the wish list.
Oh wow, okay.
For we actually were Samsung recently. We switched to LG, because we see them as a cutting edge, industry leading product in the area we're in. Yeah, so LG, I would say LG, Mitsubishi, Train, and Daikin would be the three.
Big three out there.
The big three. Yeah.
Gotcha. Oh wow, interesting.
It's funny how it's different everywhere, isn't it?
It's well, if you go to Europe, Panasonic is very big in the residential market in Europe. I think they're number one. Panasonic bought out Sanyo. I don't know if Sanyo were ever prominent in the States.
We used to sell those at the last company I worked for, but they're not a big player. Panasonic, at least in this neck of the woods, I hardly ever see them.
Yeah, it's actually quite a good product. They have a few teething problems, but I would sort of tarnish it in the UK slightly above LG. But what they do, Panasonic, they have very good after support, like after service. So there's issue with parts or technical inquiries. And, as you might have the best product, but if the after service fails, it's pointless. We've done a few videos. We've got another one coming up with Fujitsu in a few weeks where I've gone into the call center and taken calls because it's easy. You might have this anyway with where you work, but as engineers, we love to bash the manufacturers. Like, I've been on hold for an hour. This is an absolute joke. And then what happens is when you go in you go in there with a headset and you plug yourself in and you have the phone calls, it's not easy. Like, it really isn't easy. And you can understand now why it's very difficult for them to find out if the person actually knows what they're talking about, or if it's like a homeowner pretending to be an engineer, like, hey, yeah, I'm an aircon engineer.
That sounds like me trying to explain to my mom how to do something on the internet. That's the same kind of scenario right there. Love you, Mom, but you know what I'm saying, right? It's like
I know. But
do they know what a voltmeter is? You gotta really,
That's exactly that. So this is what they have. So we've done that, and I've got a bit more respect for them. But when if you've got a bad product and then bad after support, it's like
that's right.
Yeah, then you're in deep trouble here. But yeah, some of the more average manufacturers, they do have really good after support. Samsung in the UK has got so much better, and their market share is growing. But for us, we put in the products that we preach. So we put in the better products, the Daikins, the Mitsubishi Electrics.
Mm-hmm.
But we also put in, we don't put in a lot of LG, but we do a lot of Panasonic and Samsung because the service support is there.
The trend here is for reps to, reps are consolidating in the US. I don't know if you're familiar with that trend, but they're coming together and teaming up, and not teaming up. But
what do you mean by that? Are you saying they're all being bought out by private equity firms?
Some private equity firms, some larger firms are buying up smaller firms. We're actually part of a bigger conglomerate. Conglomerate's not the right word, but a parent company called Air Control Systems, and underneath that, there's our brand and there's 19 other brands. So we've got a big what we call family of brands. So that's kind of the trend. The good thing about that is you really want the reps today to be a full service provider, like you said. The differentiator is the service typically.
Yeah.
There's a lot of good manufacturers out there, a lot of good products, a lot of good sales guys who know their stuff, but you got to have the full complement of service in terms of startup, commissioning, in terms of helping after the fact, and then the whole part side of it, which we haven't talked about. Having a well-stocked warehouse, in your local area is super, super important. So, we pride ourselves on doing that. So,
Tony, where were you working in 2020 at the beginning of COVID? Were you at where
here?
You're working there. So
yeah,
in 2021, if you had a Danfoss turbo core compressor in the UK, you were selling it for double the price. So I think the smaller size Danfoss compressor sells in the UK for like £19,000. They were going on eBay for like 40k because there was a shortage, and I think there is still a shortage and a massive backlog, and that's going on parts. So people were rebuilding them, but they weren't lasting very long because the turbo core compressor, if you're an expert, you could explain it a lot more, but it's a delicate bit of equipment. Like, it's a fantastic, amazing bit of equipment from Mars. But if you don't know what you're doing, you are literally going to blow the thing up. It's bad. It's like the rotary engine that Mazda made. Did you have the issue on the Danfoss in the States? I want to ask you because it was massive here. There were hotels with no cooling, and I mean like 100 hotels in the UK that had no cooling because they had no turbo core compressors.
First of all, on the turbo core, I've been to the Tallahassee manufacturing facility because I used to call in that area, and it is like a computer chip manufacturing facility. It's very clean. It doesn't look like normally when you go into a chiller manufacturer, there's a lot of metal being thrown around. It's a little dirty because it's an industrial facility, and a lot of welding and stuff like that. But here it's like there's a lot of boards in it. And for those listening who don't know what it is, it's magnetic bearing. There's no metal to metal bearing in there. It levitates the shaft and the motor turns it, so it's free. So it has an efficiency gain because it doesn't have oil and friction and stuff like that in there. But yeah, I don't know specifically if we had that problem. If you had it, I'm sure we did, but I know we had tons of supply chain issues in early COVID. That seems to have gotten a lot better. I don't hear that much anymore. Lead times are still kind of further out sometimes than they should be, but yeah, we had those issues.
What are parts like in general in the States? Are they because in the UK it has got better. We were having some, you were putting in products and they would fail under 2 months with a warranty claim, and we were having to replace fan core units because there were no parts available for brand new fan core units. But that's slowly getting better now. Is that something which you faced?
We did face that. We still do face that today. It is slower than it used to be, but it's getting better.
Okay.
Yeah.
So these big, I'm not even going to say the word, but these big organizations which are all teaming together, like the company you work for, you said Air Controls. So these, are they holding a lot of parts and stock, and are they managing? Is that how it's working, where the organizations can hold the stock now, so you've got all bases covered? Is that something what is actively happening, or is is it just more of a bigger sales tool?
So the stock is held. Our ideal city has a parts house in the city where someone could come in, a parts counter. There's a warehouse behind them that has all the most popular parts. If it's not there, we order it next day air, either from the manufacturer or from one of our other parts facilities. So that's the benefit of having, a couple per state, is you can call up Joe in Virginia, Norfolk, and say, hey, do you got a yada, yada, yada? And he could say, yep. And he could ship it out to your customers. So
I'm with you.
Yeah. Parts is a big part of the business that, not a lot of rep firms focus on. So we have a big commitment in the parts business right now to grow that. So
okay, and just touching on engineers. So
Mhm.
I wouldn't say the UK has got a shortage of engineers because the market this year slowed down slightly, but there's definitely the engineer that sort of taught my sort of generation of engineers are slowly retiring, or those that taught me. And the new style of engineers are slightly different because they have to know, on a service point of view and an install point of view, they need to know how to connect to Wi-Fi. They need to know about more PCBs and less mechanical. What are you seeing? What does the typical HVAC engineer in America look like? Is it someone that's been brought into it a bit like yourself from family, or is it someone that just doesn't know what they want to do? Or I know HVAC has always been more prevalent in the US over the States, but is there a positive trend for HVAC in the States for becoming an engineer?
So when you use the term engineer, I think you're talking about what we would call a service tech.
Service tech, yeah.
Gotcha. Okay, we use a different word for. Okay, so yeah, so major shortage on service techs for HVAC and all the skilled trades. Actually, there's a big push in the country, and we've done several, podcasts about it and videos about. Hey, look at the trades. It's a great opportunity, especially when you compare it to some of the, I look at college as a business transaction and an ROI. Like, you're going to give them this money, they're going to give you a product, hopefully, that gives you a significant ROI.
Yeah.
That's the way I look at it, like a business transaction. But a lot of the, degrees today don't seem to have a positive eye for what you pay for them, right? And I'm not bashing college.
Sure.
I have an engineering degree. I went to college. Anyway, could have done a little better going to college.
I don't disagree at all. I've spoken to many consultants which are
Right.
in college. They're like studying and they're doing they're consultants. It's like they're full-time consultants, but like 2 days a week at university or university colleges. And they're like, they probably could have learned what they've learned in 4 years in like a year. Like, there's a lot of fluff, which they've learned more sometimes being on site with engineers. Actually looking at commissioning flow rates and commissioning airflow rates rather than sitting in the classroom and talking about airflow rates, and I'm sure you've got a lot of examples yourself where you could probably remove a lot of what even just the way learning is, not just HVAC, learning has to change because I think our attention spans are all under 10 minutes now. It's, and engineers, we know what engineers are like. Things need to keep it simple, stupid, and simplified. Otherwise, they switch off.
Yeah, the training. A funny story about the 10 minutes. I told my son the other day, "Hey, you could upload a 10-minute video now on TikTok." They moved it up to 10 minutes. He was like, "Who would watch a 10-minute video?" Like, he could understand how someone would watch that.
Wow.
Anyway, so trade schools are popular. Getting the trades back into school, the high schools. There's a movement towards that. My son, speaking of this, he's 18. He's taking community college courses in HVAC. He's studying. He's got half of his credits to his HVAC diploma, and we're talking to him about becoming an apprentice with our company. So, which would be great if I get to work with my son. But there's a big movement towards that. There's this, in the States, I don't know how it is there, but there's a stigma, working class, skilled trades versus college. There's a stigma to that still to this day, that it's not, the trades, skilled trades careers are fantastic careers if that's your thing, if you like doing that, like if you like working with your hands. Every day's different. You get that sense of satisfaction when you go into a job, you fix it, it's done, you walk away, people are happy. There's some really good benefits to it, but some people will not do that even though they want to, because of the stigma associated with it. And we try to preach, like, try it before you buy it. Go out and work with a tech for a week. Find someone. You may hate it, you may love it, you don't know. If you want to be an accountant, go talk to some accountants before you go to school. It may be completely different than what you're going to do.
It's a good point you've said that, actually, because if you wanted to use an example as an accountant, we use accountants, and our accountants are actually pretty cool for accountants, but you're right. If somebody thinks an accountant is the way forward and they go to an older fashioned type of accountancy, you'd probably walk in the door and walk out and say, "I'm never doing accountancy. I'm never going near that again." But being a HVAC service tech or an engineer, for me, you have freedom. It's the best trade in the world because you do plumbing, heating, air conditioning, electrical, you've got so many different elements. You have customer satisfaction, getting things right, and there's quite a lot of responsibility there. And it's, I know there's similar. You have electrics as well. And if you are an outgoing, extroverted person, even introverted sometimes, it's the perfect job. But unfortunately, if people want to attach stigma to things, that's going to be quite hard to beat out of someone.
Yeah, we just tell them to ignore that and try it. Just go try it. Try the different things. Do an intern or just pick up the phone. Hey, I'm thinking about this as a career. Could I come shadow you? I've had college kids. I say kids, but college folks come do that with me, and I love it. I love that they come and do that, and I get to tell them what we've learned.
It's when you don't hear from them again, and you're like, or Tony, we're the same way. You're like, I don't think they're cut out for this. Like,
that's exactly.
It's good that they come in because they've just saved 15 years. Like, and
that's the point, right? Like, it's more important to figure out what you don't want to do, because it's hard to know what you want to do, but it's easy to check off the box. Okay, like I had an internship working at a sheetrock factory. We call that drywall sheetrock. We use those two different terms. I knew after 2 days, this is not what I want to do for a living, but thank God I spent that couple months there and learned that, so I didn't end up getting in there. And find something you enjoy doing, because you're going to have to do it a lot of hours a day, unless you're, I don't know, your parents leave you a big fortune or something. Other than that, you're probably going to be working a lot.
Well, if your parents have left you a big fortune and you don't really want to work, I think the fortune won't last very long. That's the problem.
Good point.
I think the statistics are, 7 out of 10 people that win the lottery lose it within like a year, and they turn to alcohol and drugs and become Dan Blitzerian. No offense to Dan Blitzerian, because if you know who he is, crazy guy with boats and do you know who he is?
I don't know who he is, but I get the gist. I get the gist.
He's a part. He I don't say he enjoys life to the full, but he definitely expresses himself well. He's a poker player.
Gotcha.
So yeah, but no, wonderful. So Tony, it's been lovely to speak to you. It's lovely to know what you do, and it's lovely to know the difference between the US and the UK. What do you think is going to happen in the next couple of years in the States? I know we could talk politics. I could talk American politics for years, for hours, because I know more about American politics than I do UK politics. But I know the elections in the States would probably dictate to how it influence HVAC significantly, won't it? Depending on who gets re-elected. But where do you see things are going to be in the next few years? Do you think they're just going to tick along in the States, or do you think there could be drastic changes?
I'm not sure. I think the trend is towards the lower GWP refrigerants. Further lower that. I don't know what we would use. I mean, people are freaking out over the A2L mildly flammable aspect, so I can't even imagine what would happen if the push was to go to propane. So I've given up trying to predict what's going to happen. I don't know. I come in here every day and we try to, our goal is to, educate the HVAC community on what's going on. Like, here's the latest and greatest we got from our manufacturers.
Yeah.
I don't know what the trend's going to be. Maybe some decarb stuff.
Any new products that you've got out there which we haven't got here? Like, even with chillers, are there anything different? Is there anything that's come out and it's like, this is the product of the future, or anything like that? Or is it still pretty much the same? Because I'm still waiting for Elon Musk to come out with some form of, plate exchanger which uses electricity and for cooling, because the refrigeration cycle, which I know because you're an intelligent person where it comes to this, is such an old. It just hit the wall. It almost can't get any more efficient. And it's like, well, let's bring out some more refrigerants. It's a great big industry now, different refrigerants, making them. We're nearly there. There's not really much more. Yep. Once we go to low GWP, the efficiency isn't really you're never gonna get 1 to 6 or 1 to 8 COP. I know you use the word SEER quite a lot out there, don't you? Like, is it like a SEER 10 or something? Or you're never going to have a dramatic number in refrigeration, because it has its flaws in the way it works. Refrigerant vapor cycle. It has its flaws, but I'm waiting for somebody to bring something out. There's got to be something using electricity, or I know in the UK we've got phase change material. I don't know if you've got that, if that's arrived in the States, but we've got a Sunamp Mormino, which is what it does is it's got, some of them have got electrical elements where they charge during the night. It's like a storage heater. They charge during the night where electricity is cheap. and they have this phase change material which heats up to like 300 degrees.
Love it.
And then you get instant hot water, and it's just a battery. That's all it is. And then what Mitsubishi Electric have now done is they've got a multi-split unit which has a water cylinder as well. So instead of having an indoor unit on the wall, you would have a 300-liter cylinder. Nice. And then what you do is you use the refrigeration circuit. You get the 50 degrees, and that would heat up the phase change material during the night, because you don't really need aircon at night. So you can use the multi-split to do that. So, but the only thing is with that is you might install one of them products in like a year. Like, it's not something which is going to be popular. But do you see what I mean? Where it comes, phase change may become popular in large. I know there are companies which have. I don't know them personally, but I don't even know the names. But I've seen them advertised where you're having some kind of like phase change material for chillers, where you can kind of store cold or store heat, and then you're passing water across it. Because what we've got in the UK, and I don't know if it's the same in the States, just to close on this, is we have companies, and I know owners of companies that they literally have fields in the UK full of batteries, and they buy electricity during the night because we have an excess during the night, and it gets just put into the ground, and they resell it to the government. So it's like, you do what? You buy it cheap and you resell it when it's high. You're like, yeah, we're doing them a favor, because you almost think that when you look at like net zero, storing the energy for storing the energy efficiency might be the solution. I know that would lead us onto a conversation about batteries and how you make batteries and where they come from, etc., and the carbon to create them. But they've got to think of something to boost the refrigeration circuit, because I think it's nearly peaked. I don't know if you'd agree with that.
100%. Actually, I had an expert on our show not too long ago who was presenting to ASHRAE. We recorded it, and he talks about the focus needs to be on the whole building, the controls, the envelope, the windows, the training of the maintenance staff. Like, a lot of times you'll find dampers wide open because some guy put it wide open and he doesn't work there anymore, and no one knows why it's wide open, so they leave it wide open. So, the metal in the equipment now, the heat exchange metal, it's to the point where if you add 20% more metal, you're getting like 0.00% gain in efficiency, right? So like, you can't do much more with the equipment. Gotcha. You know what I'm saying? So it's
for sure.
There has to be a push towards either another technology, or to the building as a whole, or to practices of using, less power. That's another thing. And we used to do something called ice storage, which was real popular, which we call it load shifting, which at night you have these big tanks of ice, and there's like a slurry material in there, and you cool that down, and then in the daytime you run the water through the tanks, and it cools the water for your coils. That's not very popular anymore, but
it worked.
It did work. Yeah. It was expensive though, and it wasn't a green thing, because you actually use way more power that way. You're just saving money because you're using the cheap power at night to do the things.
Right. I'm with you. Right, Tony, thank you so much. It's been brilliant. Really appreciate the conversation.
Thank you, Jacob.
Enjoyed it. Thank you.